Welcome to the Crunch McDabbles show. I'm your host, Crunch McDabbles. This is the only show where we break down all of your favorite Pathfinder 2nd edition abilities and feats so that you can win the battle against the forces of darkness. That sounds good. Today's show, Double Slice. So the Great Sword Fighter, we all know him. He can do a lot of damage. That's obvious. It's just a big, strong person with a huge, sharp sword. But then along comes this other fighter, and he picks up just a regular old longsword. And the Great Sword Fighter looks him over and kind of chuckles to himself, admiring his own heft of steel. But then this other fighter, he picks up a simple short sword and puts it in his other hand, and he delicately checks the weighting of each of his weapons. And he stares down this Great Sword Fighter with a confident resolve and says, "Let's dance." So how good is the two-weapon fighter in Pathfinder 2nd edition? That's the question we're really trying to find out here, so let's find out together. The two-weapon fighter hinges around this feat at first level, Double Slice. Double Slice requires a melee weapon in each hand, and Double Slice uses two actions. With these two actions, you make two attacks, so that's good. And even better, they are both made at your current multiple attack penalty as long as one of them is an agile weapon. And even if it's not an agile weapon, the second attack is only at -2. So that is way better than -5. So right off the bat, this seems like a great feat. So how does this feat stack up right out of the box? Here is the average damage over 3 attacks for a Great Sword Fighter. For comparison purposes, we will use an 18 strength with expert training for +9 to hit and +4 damage on each hit, and it's versus an armor class of 18. One attack with the Great Sword is 7.4 damage, 2 attacks is 11.6 damage, and 3 attacks is 13.2 damage. Now we compare the two-weapon fighter using a longsword and a short sword in the same situation with the Double Slice feat. On one attack he does less damage, only 6 damage from the longsword as compared to the Great Sword at 7.4 damage, but if making 2 attacks and using Double Slice, the damage increases significantly to 11.3. That is just below the Great Sword. And if making 3 attacks, the damage goes up to 13.2. And that matches the Great Sword on 3 attacks. So a two-weapon fighter with the Double Slice feat can do the same damage as a Great Sword Fighter on 3 attacks. But hold on here, we do have a problem. The problem is that the Great Sword Fighter at first level is also going to have a first level fighter feat, and if they have power attack, they are going to be doing more damage. Power attack does the same damage on 1 attack, but 2 attacks with using the power attack does 11.9 damage. Adding in that small bit of damage from the 3rd attack brings the damage up to 13.5 on 3 attacks. And finally, manipulating the attacks, that is making a regular single attack first and then making the power attack at -5, brings the 3 attack damage up to 13.9 damage per round. This is a decent amount more damage than the two-weapon fighter. It's worth noting here that manipulating the sequence of attacks with the Double Slice feat has the opposite effect as it does with power attack. Making the Double Slice feat at the end of the turn rather than at the beginning means you take a -4 and -5 on your 2nd and 3rd attacks with the Double Slice, and the net result is a loss in damage down to 12.8 for the 3 attacks. So it's always better to use a Double Slice at the beginning of the turn with the first 2 attacks at no penalty. 2 attacks at no penalty, that's a no-brainer. So if it's less damage, why would you ever make a two-weapon fighter? Well, to begin with, the two-weapon fighter has a little better defensive options. At 4th level, they get the defensive parry feat, which allows them to spend an action to gain a circumstance bonus to armor class of +1. This is like a shield bonus. And this could be a +2 bonus if the weapon they are using to parry with has the parry trait. So if you have a Dwarven Clan Dagger or a Main Goach or the uncommon Teko Kagi. Basically the Main Goach is probably going to be your choice here unless you're a dwarf, but all of these weapons are 1d4 weapons not 1d6 weapons, so you're giving up a little bit of damage to get that extra point of AC, so this might not be a great option. But this feat at 4th level does give you a little more defensive versatility than a two-handed fighter has. So you get the AC bonus of a shield, but you don't get the shield block ability that a sword and board fighter would have. Another benefit of the 2-weapon fighter is the added versatility of having 2 weapons. Weapons could have different traits that could allow you to do different types of damage or perform different combat maneuvers. Let's say you had a warhammer in one hand and a kukri in your offhand. You could make shove attacks, trip attacks, do bludgeoning damage and slashing damage, all without changing weapons. So there you go. The gnome 2-weapon fighter build, it's a pretty good option, I guess. It's versatile at least. But the real reason to make a 2-weapon fighter, the bread and butter of this fighting style, what makes this still the reigning champ of fighting styles, it all comes down to one thing: attacks of opportunity. Yes, making attacks on the monster's turn is still king in Pathfinder, and no one does this better than the 2-weapon fighter. At level 10, they get this feat called Twin Riposte, and suddenly everything changes. It's a game changer. This allows the fighter to make an attack of opportunity whenever an attacker critically fails on an attack against them. This is in addition to the other ways of gaining attacks of opportunity, such as from movement and manipulate actions. But adding critical misses into this list of reasons to provoke is really good when you consider how all these monsters in 2nd edition are making 3rd attack actions because they really don't have anything else to do. So this makes for a right climate for critical miss opportunities for opportunity attacks. Let's compare this infusion of damage. See, both fighters start off with an opportunity attack each round at level 1, and if they use it, they add in another attack with no multiple attack penalty, which is just great. It's pure damage, and the greatsword fighter is going to do more of it, so they cruise out higher in the damage. At level 10, they both have access to the feat Combat Reflexes, gaining another attack of opportunity, and again, the greatsword fighter is way out in front in the damage. But at level 14, the 2-weapon fighter gains improved Twin Riposte, gaining another attack of opportunity, which the greatsword fighter doesn't have, pushing them to the king of DPS. And this graph isn't even a fair representation because the 2-weapon fighter is actually making these attacks of opportunity more often because they're making them every time a monster critically misses on an attack against them, which is going to happen way more often than just a normal attack of opportunity. Even big bad bosses with high 2-hit scores will roll low once in a while, especially when making 3 attacks in a round. And that, my friends, is why you play a 2-weapon fighter in Pathfinder 2nd edition. And one final thing to note here is that when the fighter gets this Twin Riposte feat at level 10 and they start making opportunity attacks when they are critically missed, they can only do this when they're in Twin Parry stance, which requires an action on their turn to get into that stance. So basically you're giving up a 3rd attack at -8 or -10, so who cares about that, in the hopes of gaining an opportunity attack on the monster's turn at no penalty later. So this is still a good trade-off. You get the extra AC and you dramatically increase your chances of when you're getting an opportunity attack. It's just hard to know how good it is for comparison because it all depends on how many attacks of opportunity you get each round. Also, note this, at level 16 you get the Twin Defense feat, which is just one action to stay in the Twin Parry mode for the entire encounter, so you don't have to spend the action each turn. So by level 16, the 2-weapon fighter is, without dispute, back on top, the king of DPS. And that's it. This has been the Crunch McDabbles Show. I'm your host, Crunch McDabbles. Make sure you don't forget about all your buffs you got, because that poor cleric spent 2 actions casting that spell, so please make them feel like they did something. And be smart out there. The dark forces are unforgiving, and they're trying to take over the world. You got to know what you're doing, so watch Crunch McDabbles and turn the tides back on them.